This is Franklin's new C45 series, 4 new models all launching June 10th that join the C45 hybrid that launched back in March. 2 elongated paddles under the Dynasty name in 14 and 16 millimeters, 2 standard shapes under the Tempo name also in 14 and 16. On paper, these paddles check all the right boxes. Raw T700 carbon fiber faces, dual stage thermoforming, and a foam injected perimeter built to resist breakdown. Spin numbers are high, the power profile looks promising, and the price point lands at $229, right in the Gen 3 power paddle sweet spot. But that's the spec sheet. What matters more is that none of these paddles feels finished out of the box. So what are they like to play? Let's get into it. In stock form, the Dynasty and Tempo need time and tuning. They feel stiff, compact, and underdeveloped, just like the original C45 hybrid did when I first tested it, albeit that played a bit softer. But once you add a few strips of tungsten tape, for me, to the 4 corners, about a half gram per inch, everything changes. The sweet spot expands, stability improves, contact feels more unified, and suddenly, you're not fighting the paddle anymore, you're working with it. That transformation, that's the real story here, and what interests me most about these paddles. Franklin hasn't told me this, but I think they built this lineup for players who want to customize, personalize, and optimize their setup. These are paddles that reward tinkering. As always with reviews like this one, Franklin had no say in it. All opinions are mine, and if you do pick one up, you can use code MPB to save at checkout. So let's break down what's under the hood of this new Franklin C45 lineup, because this is where things start to get interesting. All 4 paddles, the Dynasty and Tempo in 14 and 16 millimeter builds, share the same core construction and materials. At the heart of each paddle is a polypropylene honeycomb core, but what sets the C45 apart is what's layered around it. These paddles use a dual stage thermoforming process. First, the carbon fiber face and the polypropylene core are pressed together in a unibody mold. Then 2 separate foam channels are CNC routed along the paddle's perimeter. Franklin injects EVA foam into the inner track to enhance pop and rebound, and polyurethane foam into the outer track to soften vibrations and boost stability. After that, everything goes back into the press for a second thermoforming stage to seal the structure and reinforce durability. The paddle face is a raw T700 carbon fiber with a coarse peel-ply texture, but instead of being laid flat, it's arranged in a 45-degree bias weave diagonally across the face. Franklin says this angle enhances both spin generation and structural strength. In testing, that checks out. The surface texture isn't overly gritty, but consistent and grippy enough to produce good spin across all 4 models. This build gives you a noticeably firmer response than control paddles like the Selkirk Lux or Prism Flash line. It's not plush, not either the 14 or 16 millimeter, but it's structured, and you feel that structure most when the ball meets the face. Compared to the original C45 hybrid, which had great feedback but lacked maxed out dimensions, these new paddles represent a clear evolution. The elongated Dynasty paddles now use the full legal length and width, 24 inches. The Tempo model gets closer, though it still falls short of the full 16-inch profile. But across the board, you're getting more usable surface area and a higher grade build than Franklin's earlier Gen 3 efforts. Now, if you've seen the X-ray overlays, which I'll put up on the screen now, you can literally trace where those foam channels sit. You'll see the clean outer perimeter lines, where the foam stabilizes the frame, and the inner edge ring that's all about pop and rebound. And one small but important detail, the added mass from that dual foam system slightly increases swing weight. That extra perimeter weight improves torsional resistance, but also means these paddles respond better when you meet the ball cleanly, which is a shocker. These won't bail you out of a jam, and they handle off-center contact more predictably, especially once you start layering in tungsten to the corners. So if you're coming from a Gen 2 build or something without foam reinforcement, this design gives you more structure, more edge stability, and a cleaner response from the paddle face. And so now that we've talked about the construction, let's dig deeper into the specs, because the numbers don't tell the whole story here, but they do set the stage for how these paddles feel and perform. The Franklin C45 Dynasty and Tempo paddles each come in two core thicknesses, 14mm and 16mm, with a clear divide in shape and play profile. The Dynasty models are elongated. Both the 14 and 16mm versions measure 16.5 inches long by 7.5 inches wide, with a 5.5-inch handle and a 4.25-inch grip circumference. These paddles give you added reach and a bit more leverage through the swing, especially useful when you're hitting through the ball or redirecting pace. The Tempo models are built around a standard frame, 15.75 inches long by 7.875 inches wide. Handle length drops down to 5.25 inches, which will feel limiting if you hit two-handed backhands or you want more spacing in transition. This is where Franklin had some room to stretch this to the full 16 by 8, 24 total inches allowed, especially given how light the Tempo paddles are, but chose not to for some reason, and I'm not sure why. It's a missed opportunity to maximize stability and surface area without penalty. In terms of weight, both Dynasty paddles come in just under 8 ounces stock, 7.9 ounces for the 14mm and 7.91 for the 16mm. Swing weight clocks in at 118.1 and 117.75 respectively. Twist weight is 6.05 on both. These paddles feel fast for elongateds, but not unstable. There's just enough mass behind contact to hold up in hands battles and plenty of room for players who like to mod with tungsten. The Tempos are a different story. They're light, very light, 7.63 ounces on the 14mm and 7.75 ounces on the 16mm. Swing weight is 102.05 and 103.05. That puts them right at the bottom percentile of all the paddles I've tested. Twist weight is also lower, 6.25 for the 14mm and 6.5 for the 16mm. That combination of low swing weight and moderate twist weight makes these feel quick in transition, but unstable without added weight. They're twitchy. Off-center hits can send feedback straight into your hand or spray shots if you're not centered. For players who like to fine-tune their paddle, the Tempo line is wide open, and tune it you must to get the most out of it. There's so much margin for customization here. You can add tungsten to all four corners, bump up the twist weight by at least a full point, and still keep the paddle under nearly 8 ounces. For those who want something that just works right out of the wrapper, the Dynasty paddles are the safer place to start, especially the 16mm. The 14 was just too difficult for me to play stock. So whether you prefer that extra reach of an elongated shape or the faster reloads of a compact build, all four paddles sit in the power category, but they bring very different weight profiles to the table. You'll want to choose based not just on shape, but how much effort you're willing to put in to dial each of these in. Across the board, none of the C45 paddles feels fully finished out of the box. The build is solid, the surface is consistent, but in stock form, each one left me second guessing midpoint, like I was working harder than I should to keep the ball in play. Starting with the Dynasty 14mm, it swings fast, hits firm, and delivers decent pace when you time it clean. But the sweet spot is narrow. You'll feel every miss. Serve speed clocks in at 56.5 miles per hour, punch volleys at 36.9. These are strong numbers. Still, during drills and gameplay, the paddle felt too light at the edges. On counters and resets, it didn't hold position, and at least not well enough to inspire trust. The 16mm version plays steadier, slightly slower on serve and pop at 56.9 miles per hour and 36.4 miles per hour, but it gives you a bit more forgiveness and time on the ball. Less recoil, less chatter, but not by much. Neither Dynasty paddle truly stabilizes until you add weight. Once I corner loaded each one with about 8 grams of tungsten, they changed. The feel got tighter, the dwell improved, and the sweet spot became more functional across the face. The Tempo 14mm was the biggest outlier. It's the lightest of the bunch and feels like it. At just 102 swing weight and 7.63 ounces static, it moves quickly, but comes through contact too fast. That makes it unpredictable unless you're locked in. The stock power numbers are lower too, 55.2 miles per hour on serves and 36.9 miles per hour on punch volleys. And while spin is solid at 2,233 RPM, it's hard to access that spin unless you're swinging aggressively. With added weight, the Tempo 14mm becomes far more stable and playable, especially in tight exchanges. The 16mm Tempo follows that same pattern. Low swing weight, decent pop, but incomplete without added mass. Serve speed lands at 55.6 miles per hour with 36.5 miles per hour on punch volleys. Again, very playable on paper, but the feel isn't cohesive until you customize it. Once weighted, the paddle starts tracking better. Resets gain depth, volleys stop fluttering, and the paddle starts to respond instead of react. The impact feel across all 4 builds is consistent, firm, and dense. Nothing hollow. You're not getting foam core plush or springy rebound. You're getting a solid pop off the face and clear feedback on contact. The paddles don't feel dead, they just feel like they need tuning. Maneuverability is high on all models, especially the Tempos. But without proper balance, that maneuverability can backfire, making the paddle feel handsy or hard to time. With added weight at the corners, both lines start to play the way they were probably meant to. The Dynasties gain punch and confidence. The Tempos settle into a faster and more responsive groove. Bottom line, all 4 paddles benefit from weight. You can play them stock, but if you do, you're missing what makes the line interesting. These builds are not flawed, they're just a bit unfinished until you make them yours and finish them for yourself. All right, let's break down how each of these 4 shapes actually plays and where they separate. The Dynasty models, both the 14mm and 16mm, are Franklin's elongated options. They give you extra extension on drives, flicks, and counterattacks. The 5.5-inch handle is long enough for two-handed backhands, and the 16.5-inch length means you've got the leverage to finish from the baseline or push pace in the middle of the court. Out of the two, the 14mm feels quicker but is less forgiving. The sweet spot is tighter, and off-center hits drop off fast unless you've customized the paddle with weight. The Tempo models bring a different profile. These are shorter, 15.75 inches long, with a slightly wider face at 7.875 inches. They're not true 16x8, so Franklin left some margin on the table. That said, the wider design still helps if you play quick at the net. The sweet spot is compact but centered, and it sits lower than on the Dynasty. The shorter handle, just 5.25 inches long, won't be ideal for players who regularly hit two-handed backhands or want some extra reach. In terms of shape hierarchy, Dynasty is for reach, Tempo is for speed. If you like taking space and attacking early, the elongated shape will serve you better. If your game is built around quick reactions and hand battles and pressure resets, the Tempo's shorter frame and lower swing weight might be the edge you're looking for. No matter which one you choose, none of these paddles feels fully optimized without some customization. But once tuned, each shape feels like a distinct lane, and does so with more clarity than the original C45 hybrid. So here's the bottom line. Franklin's new C45 lineup isn't built to impress straight out of the wrapper. It's built to be customized. These paddles are best for players who are willing to put in a little extra work to get a setup that fits their personalized game. If you like to drive, attack early, and prefer a firmer but not stiff and more connected feel off the face, the Dynasty 14mm is the one I'd try. Once it's weighted, it swings fast, hits clean, and delivers strong directional control. The Dynasty 16mm gives you a bit more margin if your game leans on drops and blocks and resets, but you still need enough pop to finish points. It's the more stable of the two and easier to trust in transition. It's not built for softness, but it gives you enough time and structure to hold the line and flip the point when it matters. Now for the Tempos. The Tempo 14mm is snappy and fast, but unstable unless you weight it. Once dialed in, it becomes a compact, high-speed option for players who want quick hands and don't need much extra forgiveness. The sweet spot is small and mishits are exposed, but if you stay in rhythm, it can feel like a weapon. The Tempo 16mm is the most forgiving of the group in my assessment. Still light, still fast in hand, but with better feel in the midcourt and more stability through contact. If your game involves quick transitions, soft roll volleys, or attacking from awkward angles, this one gives you some extra room to work with. If you're coming from something like the Yola Scorpius 14mm or any paddle that plays firmer and more direct, this line could be a strong match, especially if you've been looking for more feedback and less of that muted feel. But if you want max pop or a heavier swing weight, it's not the right fit. Same goes for if you're looking for something plug and play without any tuning. These paddles aren't hands-off, they need setup, but if you're willing to put that time in, they offer a unique blend of speed, structure, and customization that's harder to find anywhere else. All four C45 paddles, the Dynasty 14mm, Dynasty 16mm, Tempo 14mm, and Tempo 16mm, it's a lot of millimeters, launches on June 10th at a retail price of $229. That puts them right in the middle of the premium paddle market. Not budget friendly, but not at the top end either. What you're paying for here isn't just a paddle, it's a platform. The construction is solid, the materials are premium, but the performance potential isn't fully unlocked until you tune it. These aren't turnkey paddles, they're tuning platforms. And with weight tailored to your hand and playstyle, they can unlock a level of performance that's hard to get off the shelf. Think of it like golf. Nobody expects stock clubs to fit perfectly. You get them dialed in and then they're yours. That's what this lineup offers. High ceiling builds that reward customization. If you're the type of player who wants something that just works for you the moment you unwrap it, you may want to look elsewhere. But if you enjoy dialing in your gear and building something that fits your game exactly, then $229 is a fair starting point. If you plan on grabbing one of these when they launch, you can use code NPB to save some money at checkout. So to wrap it up, Franklin's new C45 lineup brings real potential. The Dynasty models give you reach and pop. The Tempo models give you speed and sharp handling. None of them are perfect out of the box, but they're built to be tuned. And once you put in that work, they open up in a way that's honestly surprising. If you've got questions about weighting, shape differences, or how these compare to something you're already playing, drop it down in the comments. If this breakdown helped you, hit like, subscribe, and share it with someone who's shopping for a new paddle. And if you decide to pick one up when they launch on June 10th, you can use code NPB at checkout to save a few bucks. So that's it, guys. That's the review. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.